right. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on your Monday, starting the week with us. We have a great event in store for you today. I want to give a big welcome to the families, the kids, the educators, and others who are joining us as we take part in an event to celebrate the 7th edition of Science Odyssey. So this session promises to be a very interesting one. Before we do that, though, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land which each of us calls home. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the treaty lands and the ancestral and unceded territory of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people who are the caregivers of this land. Thank you. So my name is Joe Grabowski. I am with an organization called Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. We bring science, adventure, exploration, and conservation live into classrooms across North America through virtual field trips, through virtual guest speakers. So if you do have some time, take a look at exploringbytheseat.com. You can find all the events that we have coming up, sometimes 40, 50, even 60 live events a month for classrooms to join into. And I really want to draw your attention to our Ocean Week events we have coming up in June. So /Ocean Week, and you can find a really cool lineup of events you can check out with your students, with scientists, explorers, and researchers exploring the final frontier on our planet. All right, let's continue along with today's event. So on this occasion, we're delivering this fantastic webinar in partnership with the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada, better known as NSERC. So I'm sure this is a name you'll get to recognize when you get a bit older and you pursue a career in science or engineering in Canada. And that's because NSERC is Canada's largest supporter of discovery and innovation and a leading promoter of science and engineering to young Canadians, like so many we have tuning in today. So for the last 7 years, NSERC is also the leading force behind Science Odyssey. Science Odyssey is a national campaign that celebrates Canadian achievements in science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. Every year in May, hundreds of science outreach leaders deliver fun, engaging, and inspiring activities to Canadians of all ages. So today, to celebrate Science Odyssey with you, we bring you a very interesting discussion with one of the great researchers funded by NSERC, Lina Kattan. So I'm going to bring her in right now for a quick hello. Hi, Lina. How are you doing today?
Hi, Joe. How are you doing? Hi, everyone.
Good. It is great to have you joining us today. Really excited to see you. And we have a great group of classrooms across North America joining us. We're really excited to dive into a little bit of your research. And of course, I have no doubt they're going to have a ton of questions for you.
Welcome, everybody. It's really great to see so many kids, parents, and teachers joining from North America.
All right. Excellent. Well, let's get a proper introduction going here. So Lina is a professor of civil engineering at the Schulich School of Engineering at the University of Calgary. She is currently the director of the NSERC-CREATE program in Integrated Infrastructure for Sustainable Cities, which focuses on finding systematic solutions to understand the multifaceted needs of tomorrow's cities. Lina is a member of the College of Scholars, Artists, and Scientists of the Royal Society of Canada and sits on their college council. She is also the recipient of the 2014 Killam Emerging Research Leader Award and the 2022 Killam Annual Professorship Award NSERC category. Lina's research program focuses on developing solutions to urban transportation problems with a special focus on ITS, emerging vehicular technologies, connected and autonomous vehicles, equity and fairness in transportation, traffic flow, and many other issues related to transportation. So Lina, thanks again for being with us this afternoon. Again, it is great to have you. Afternoon for us, and I guess maybe just hitting lunchtime for you.
Yeah, it's lunchtime now for us.
All right, very cool. Well, before we do some interview questions here together, I want to give a shout out to those tuning in live via YouTube. Use that chat sidebar to introduce yourselves. And then let's keep it open for questions. I see lots of students who are joining and saying hello. That's great. But let's keep that chat sidebar open for those questions when the time does come. So let's dive right into things. Lina, you're a civil engineer. You specialize in transportation systems and traffic management. How did you get there? When was it when you said, you know what, I'm going to be a civil engineer. I'm going to solve traffic problems and improve transportation. What inspired you?
Yeah, so when I was like a kid at school, I was really fascinated by Legos, train sets, and anything related to science and discovery. I spent lots of time reading magazines related to discovery. I used to read a French magazine called Science et Vie. I don't know, it's very popular in Europe and in the Middle East. And also reading on the life of great people and inventors. And I was sure like I want to be a researcher. But when I entered the university, I wasn't sure like if I want to do civil engineering or architecture, but I ended doing civil engineering. And it wasn't until the last year of my civil engineering that I found my interest and my passion to transportation. So what happened is we had a visitor professor coming and talking about urban planning, and especially because like I was in Beirut at that time, and I don't know if you are aware, like Beirut, like Lebanon was under a civil war, and it was just like recovering from the 17 years of civil war, and all the urban infrastructure was completely demolished. Right. So I find that very fascinating. It's something that also I can serve, my community by understanding how to make things better.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what I really liked about that story that you shared was that it wasn't until a little bit later in your education that you realized kind of civil engineering was where your passion lies. And I think a lot of students sometimes think that, oh no, if I don't know in elementary school, if I don't know in high school, if I don't know in college and university, I'm in big trouble. But the truth is, there is no right way to get into your career, no correct path, and your passions and your interests can change over time.
Yeah, and I want to also note that transportation engineering is very multidisciplinary. You don't have to do civil engineering to do transportation, especially with today's issues in transportation. We need expertise from computer scientists, from electrical engineers, from economists, from urban planners. So it's really very multidisciplinary.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So now some of our students may not know this firsthand, but maybe they have been in a traffic jam before. So you're kind of thinking of solutions in your head, dreaming of the perfect system, the ideal vehicle to avoid that situation. So, one of the key words in your research is sustainability. So can you explain what that is? What is a sustainable city? And then maybe elaborate on, if it's going to be possible to achieve that kind of a city. So maybe, get into that word sustainability and what is a sustainable city?
Yeah, so whenever we talk about sustainability, it's related to three aspects: the social aspect, the economic aspect, and also the environmental aspect. So it has like three pillars. And sustainability is an intra-generation and intergenerational issue. So this means we need to meet the social, economic, and environmental needs of the present generation without compromising that of the future generation. So it's very important to look at intergenerational issues. And when we talk about cities, like if you look at cities provide us shelter, accessibility to, to see our friends, to work, to school. It also provides us the energy, water, and like everything we need to sustain our daily life. So this means this is provided through the urban infrastructure, right? Like whether we talk about communication infrastructure or the transportation infrastructure, water, waste management, also to collect the waste and the various utilities. So the cities at the end of the day are somehow, if you talk from physical perspective, they are the summation of these sets of infrastructure. And these infrastructure sometimes work in harmony, but sometimes they work in conflict. And in order, infrastructure are very important because whenever a city grows, so whenever we have urbanization, most of the time they need to expand infrastructure. And infrastructure is a key driver of CO2 emissions. So for instance, in my field in transportation, 25% of CO2 emissions is coming from transportation in urban areas. So to achieve a sustainable city, we have like all of the infrastructure, whether it's buildings, water, wastewater, transportation, utilities, they should all meet the sustainability goals. And in order to be able to lead to improved air quality and water quality and zero waste. So any similarity to a forest, I would say a city is like a forest. If you wanna achieve a sustainable city, it's like a forest. And in forest, we have zero waste. We never have waste in forest. So waste from one system is food for another system. So ideally, this is what we need to achieve. And in order to do that, we really need everybody to work together and to collaborate. So we need citizens, politicians, businesses to all cooperate to improve, to lead to that, to sustainability.
Yeah.
So I can give you, if you want, like some examples. I can share some screen about sustainable transportation, just as an example.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
I really do like how you brought up the forest as kind of that model, right? Ecosystems are so well designed. They work together so well that everything is used. There is no waste. And that's a lofty goal for our cities, as we know so many people are moving into cities at this time.
Yeah, and like if you look a little bit in history, it seems people had more appreciation to resources. So they were like really conscious about not producing much waste. If we look like at 16th century cities, or so I think we changed that a little bit, but we need to go back. So this is an example, for instance, of like how we can change our cities. Just like one example. So the buildings are the building blocks because they are the final destination for every infrastructure, right? Like it's in buildings that we live or we work or we meet with each other. And so in order to achieve sustainability, we need to change the land use. And we need to have a little bit higher density and higher diversity. Higher diversity means we don't have segregation of where people live and where they work. They live and work almost in the same place, like almost in the same neighborhood. And this is very important because when you bring the origin closer to the destination, people can walk, can take transit, can take e-scooters. And whenever also you have higher density and higher diversity of land uses, you can better serve the neighborhood with public transit, because public transit you will generate higher demand for public transit, so you will have higher frequency public transit. So this is one example. And so these things, for sure, like it's policymakers and traffic planners who need to take this initiative. But there's lots of things that are also related to us as citizens, because we are the final consumption, right? Like we are the one who consume. So we need to change also our decisions on where to travel and how to travel, what to eat more local, like how to dress, and looking a little bit like more about ethical dressing, ethical food, and so on, and where and what we purchase. Okay, so I'm going to stop my screen.
Okay, absolutely. You're so right. So many of what we do in our daily life and the decisions we make in our cities can have a really big impact on what happens with our waste and what kind of products are available. We can make a lot of decisions in our daily life and with our wallets that can lead to a more sustainable city. Absolutely. Okay, well, so Lina, let's talk a bit more about your research. So you lead a program funded by NSERC. It's called the Integrated Infrastructure for Sustainable Cities. So could you tell us what you do with this program and what you want to achieve?
Yeah. So at the program name, it focuses on cities, urban infrastructure, and sustainability, right? So the focus is on cities because cities are really critical keys in order to drive the climate change and to improve climate change, because we will have like more and more urbanization. And we also we are not today at the crossroad because we have lots of disruption, the forces, such as the climate change is the biggest disruption. but also loss of disruption from future technologies. Like we talk about artificial intelligence, and also disruption in transportation technologies and other technologies. In order to understand disruption, I think the best example is to think about COVID. So COVID was a big disruption, and it also impacted loss of infrastructure in our cities. I will give you an example. So when COVID hit, most of us, we decided to work from home, right? Lots of people decided to work from home, and this impacted so much our transit system, and it also impacted so much our roads. Because the roads were almost empty. The parking were so much impacted, and all of a sudden there was a surge on e-commerce, like lots of people ordering things online, and we had lots of delays in getting things. At the same time, people started reclaiming more their urban the urban centers, and we have seen lots of cities reclaiming, reclaiming half of the streets to become more pedestrian or more, and we have pop-up restaurants and coffee shops. And so this is an example of a disruption. And on the longer term, people started also relocating. Some people decided that we don't want to live anymore in downtown. So you have people shifting their residence location more to suburban areas. This means we will have more pressure on our urban infrastructure in the suburban areas. So this is an example of disruption where things change drastically, and the change has a ripple effect from one infrastructure to another. Because when people live in suburban areas, this means you have more demand on waste collection, on water, on utility, and everything. So similar disruption is expected with technologies such as driverless cars, but the biggest challenge is really climate change. And what is really very important is to understand that these things and all these issues related to climate change are interconnected and interdependent, because they are really created as the continuous outcome of our decisions, our choices, and the interactions between many players that live in urban cities. And so accounting for this interconnectedness is very important. This is why we have to look at the infrastructure in a integrated fashion. So it's very similar to our human body, right? Like every infrastructure can have you can draw some similarity with our one of the system, our human body. And so it's in order to meet the sustainability goals of our cities, we need really to so lots of people think it's the solution is by having more innovation. For sure, innovations are very important. However, in the past, we looked at innovations in silos, and oftentimes we'd solve one problem here, but we created another problem there. So this is why it's very important to look at the system as a whole in order to understand what the implication.
Yeah, so integrate things and not just look at everything separately. Every piece needs to kind of come together and fit together, and then you're going to get that more efficiency, more sustainability in those cities.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so anytime you see a city of the future, the city in the future, you often see vehicles flying. You see maybe driverless vehicles. I always think of Back to the Future when Doc says, roads, where we're going, we don't need roads, and the DeLorean takes off and flies. So do you think that's fiction, or do you think we might be going that way someday, maybe more towards the driverless cars, getting through cities faster?
No, definitely, the driverless cars are there. I mean, the question is when they will be more present in our network. So these cars are, in order to have sustainable cities, they have to be electric for sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
Or using another form of sustainable form of energy. They most likely going to be shared. So this means you carpool. I don't see lots of people will be owning these cars. It's more, let's say the first deployment will be more by transit agencies and maybe freight managers. So, and they also can talk to each other. So they can communicate with each other. So for instance, they can talk with the signal, they can talk with the infrastructure, and they can share very important information in order to improve the efficiency of the network. So they're not going to be there overnight. It's going to take a while. So you're not going to have to wake up in the morning and then see like, oh, everybody is driving, like everybody is driving a driverless car.
Yeah. Do you think we're going to get to a point where in major cities, drivers are obsolete? You won't be able to drive yourself. You have to kind of jump into one of these shared vehicles, or, artificial intelligence get you where you need to go.
We see today, for instance, that we have computer aid, like we are a little bit assisted so if you take the Tesla today, so when we talk about autonomy, we have different levels, and the highest level is when you have, like, you don't need a driver at all. But we are somehow now in between. We have driving assistant. So we have like some cars, luxurious cars, where it can help you to park, or it can help you to maintain. So we have some type of economy today. In order to go to driverless, like fully driverless, these cars need to prove that they are safer than driver.
Yeah.
They have to, and it's a very interesting issue, because there are lots of debates about, like safety and security, and if they have to, there are lots of ethical and philosophical debates about around driverless cars. So for instance, in a case of they have to crash into someone, like what do they do? Like do they compromise their passengers, or do they compromise people on the road? So there are lots of new complexity, a new layer of complexity that we never thought about.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember reading about that. Is what's the right decision? What's the moral decision? If the car is going to crash, does it protect the driver? Does it protect other drivers, pedestrians? So yeah, we're getting there, right? That seems to be the way things are going towards that autonomous driving. But I think we still have a little bit of progress to go before we're ready to kind of fully jump into that.
Yeah, and the really challenge is when we're going to have this traffic that is mixed. Part of it is human driven, part of it is driverless.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, one more question from me before we turn things loose to the classrooms. A lot of the groups tuning in are kind of middle school age today, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade. So what would you say to them? What would you tell them about the future field of study in civil engineering and transport systems? What would you say to, inspire them, get them to take a look at this field?
Yeah, transportation really today is undergoing a major disruption, especially with the advancements in technologies, with artificial intelligence, big data analytics, and robotics, and so on. Also, electrification. So we can see recent examples such as the e-scooters that are, like you can go and log into your app, and you can locate the e-scooter that you need. And also, if you need also an Uber ride, you do the same. So today, like, our transportation models are really based on like all simulation models, and they need to be updated. So we need lots of expertise in order to update these simulation models and to modify them to be able to take advantage of the new technologies, and to be able to have a better plans for the future of our cities.
All right. Great stuff. Well, I say it's time that we turn things over to those who are joining us live. Use that chat sidebar and fire in some questions for us. I see questions coming in here already. So let's grab one here from YouTube to get us started. I thought this was a really interesting one here about our cities. It seemed like at one stage, the future of cities was building up, right? More people kind of in a smaller area. But now it almost seems like it's shifted to more of a sprawl, where cities are sprawling out more. So do you think that is going to create maybe more issues as we kind of look towards sustainability, as cities sprawl out more instead of up?
Yeah, definitely. Urban sprawl is a big issue. and it threatens sustainability. Because imagine, like, whenever you have higher density, you would need less infrastructure to serve, right? So, for instance, like if you have a small area and you have higher density, so you have houses in apartments, for instance, buildings, you need less road to serve this area. However, if you spread them horizontally, you need more roads. And this is whenever you have the road system runs in parallel with the water system, right? Because you have the water infrastructure is most of the time is in parallel, right? It's running with the transportation infrastructure, with the road infrastructure, also the utilities, the electricity, the fiber optic connection, everything is. So all the utilities have to expand more. So you have to build more infrastructure. And also imagine, like, when you're heating a house versus you're heating the same size house, but in an apartment building where you have it sharing like some walls with other apartments. So you need less energy to heat it and less energy to also cool it. So urban sprawl is an issue.
Yeah. All right. So we have a few camera classrooms joining us today. If you can just do me a favor when you're ready to ask a question, just turn your camera on for me, and that'll be a signal for me to come to your classroom and then bring you in to get a chance to ask a live question. But I'm going to grab another question here from a classroom in Etobicoke sent this question in here, Bloorley Middle School. And so in your opinion, what do you think would be more efficient? I guess they're noticing that right now there's a lot of widening going on the 401, especially between like Guelph to Toronto, a lot of widening. Is that going to be more efficient than a better public transit system, or is there an even better alternative?
So for sure, when you have public transit system is the most efficient way to move to move people. So imagine the space, the road that you need, like the space of road that you need, if everybody is driving alone in a car versus they are in a bus or in a transit car. So you save a lot of space when people use transit system. At the same time, it's like less emissions, so it's less congestion, less emission, less like more saving on the space and the resources. So for sure, transit is very important in terms of it's. I would say it's the key of sustainability. Yeah. So for sure, it's not like a solution everywhere. So if you live in rural areas, for sure you're not going to build an LRT or or a subway system, but like you can do demand responsive system or different type of transit system.
Okay, good stuff. Well, let's grab another question here. There's so many great questions coming in here, and this is a really interesting one about privacy. We think about privacy. Is that another thing that we need to be thinking about? If we're going to be sharing rides and sharing vehicles, sharing information back and forth, is privacy something that you think about when you think about sustainable cities and their development?
For sure, security is a very important issue and as part of sustainability. And I don't work in this area, but like I know lots of researchers do research in blockchain. Mm-hmm. In order to meet the security issues around, future automation and all these sharing that we're going to have.
Yep. All right. Yeah. I mean, there's so many layers to think about as we bring this technology online and we bring it into our systems. And I think sometimes maybe the technology might come before we kind of think of some of the implications sometimes too. And we kind of learn a little bit as things come online of how things need to change or be adapted to, city lifestyle, people lifestyle, and how things are actually being used.
Yeah.
Okay. Another interesting question here is just about, kind of looking at Canada. How many cars are currently on the road in Canada Do you have a statistic for that? And do you think it's, what's a goal? Is there a goal to get it down to? Do we have a countrywide goal?
So yeah, I don't have the number, but like for sure, every municipality have its own strategic plan, and they try to cut congestion. And to do that, they have like some transit plans in place. For instance, in Calgary, we're talking about the Green Line. It's a LRT line that is coming, and I was in Toronto. I studied in Toronto, so I know like every time I go and visit Toronto, I see like more addition to the transit system there. So transit is the key because you want to give people a nice alternative to the car.
Yeah.
Because you want it to be as attractive as the car. We don't want to punish people. We want to give them a nicer alternative and more choices.
Attractive, efficient. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and doesn't mean like we don't want people to use their car, for sure, but they use transit more often. So instead of driving to work every day, maybe use your car in the weekend, or or 3 times a day. So it's just like, even if you reduce it by 1 or twice a week, if everybody does that, it's really important. It has a big effect.
Yeah. And so I used handy Google to take a look at some statistics here to see if I could grab a thought here. And it looks like in Canada, we're going in the wrong direction. So in 2018, it went up 1.8%, 35.7 million vehicles on the road in Canada. So yeah, it looks like we have some
COVID.
Well,
yeah, I think COVID had a big impact because people try to avoid public transit.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And hopefully we can go back. Like we will see, but lots of things. This is why it's a disruption, because it changed so many things, and lots of things might never go back. Like I don't believe we will go 100% to full-time working at, like physically working at in our office. Most of us.
No, and that can be a good thing too, right? Kind of having that hybrid work schedule, or maybe you're in sometimes, or maybe it turns out you can fully work from home, and that's a way to get some vehicles off the road, with more people working at home who don't need to be in that office space per se. But I think you brought up an amazing point, is COVID really did shake things up. And public transit probably is looking less attractive to some people, being in a confined space with a larger group. So I guess maybe that'll be part of future campaigns, is kind of almost a reset to kind of attract people back to public transport, and maybe a little eye on, how we can make filtration and things like that a little bit more efficient.
Or rethinking how we want to design our public transport.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, more open air perhaps.
Or more demand responsive. Like we have to rethink, because lots of things changed, and also we had a mutation in where people live, or also our employment locations, right? Like lots of companies might decide to downsize.
Yeah.
So things changed, and whenever land use changed, the demand for transport changed.
Right. So we've got a grade 5 student in Surrey, British Columbia, tuning in. This is Cole, and Cole wants to know, how can we convince people to maybe give up their car, or maybe give up using it as much, because he's saying in his area they don't actually own a car right now, and people think they're maybe a little crazy. So they don't understand how you could potentially live without a car, or with less. So how can we start kind of familiarizing people with that idea to start making some changes in their daily life?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, it doesn't have to be a drastic change, like not owning a car. Mm-hmm. Maybe at the beginning it can be using the car less often. Like I walk to university. I live close. I intentionally decided to live close to university, so I can walk, so I can get exercise, fresh air. It's a nice, like 25 minutes, meditation almost for me.
Sure.
And so like you can try to do small changes here and there. So if I need like some grocery, I I walk to the nearest grocery shop and get my grocery. So it's really a decision. It's very important, the characteristics of your neighborhood, because
Yeah.
if you live in a suburban area, I'm sure like you have to take your car even if you need bread, right? Like, because more typical suburban areas, they are like you live, and around you it's only like houses. So if you want to walk, it's too far. It's not You're not going to stay 1 hour walking to get your milk or to get your bread.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It is about making choices. It is about, where you live. But I know, I live in a smaller village, so it's you can get out and walk. You can hop on your bike, which is really nice. I know for sure if I lived somewhere like Toronto or Calgary, I'd have a car, but I think I'd try and just like it would be for weekends, just to get out. Maybe if you want to escape the city a little bit. Yeah, battling that traffic every day. A public transport option just seems like absolutely the way to go. So, a question here in the chat about a city or a country that you think, this is a grade 5-6 class, Mr. Ferguson's class. Shout out to them. Is there somewhere that's further ahead? Maybe it's a country, maybe it's a city, somewhere where they're doing a great job. You're seeing cool things coming up in that city or that country.
Yeah, so I think about countries that are doing great. I believe more European cities, and I'm going to talk smaller size European cities, like not for sure. Like if you talk about Paris or London, they are mega cities, so they have their own, like subway system and so on. But like, for instance, Amsterdam or like these small size cities, I think they did a great job. Stockholm, for instance, they did a great job. And like cutting their carbon emissions and reshaping their cities to become more sustainable. So yeah, I think we can learn lots of some good lessons from like cities that were there and like changed the way they do things.
Yeah.
But as I said, it's really need everybody to work together.
Yeah.
I mean, we have our part as citizens, but also like politicians also, they have to do their share. So we all have to work towards
There's
this
a
goal.
role for everybody to play.
Exactly.
In this. Yeah, absolutely. And do you think, you mentioned working together, you mentioned, Stockholm was an example of a city that's doing some interesting things. In your field of civil engineering, do you find there is a lot of kind of collaboration across different countries? Are there lots of conferences? Does your job, do you find yourself traveling a bit with your job?
Yeah, for sure. Like we have to present our work in conferences all over the world. So it gives us also a good chance like to see how people are doing in different cities.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at the same time, you hear from people talking about what they did in other cities, right? So like whenever you go to conference, it's like you're seeing almost the whole world in a way.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, I always like to end off with this question because I think it's a really important one. And actually, maybe we'll squeeze in one more question because this is an interesting one that just came in via the chat. Is there something out there, a website or something where we can kind of look at different cities or different regions and see some kind of sustainability measurement? Is there anything like that for Canada?
I'm not aware of anything for Canada.
Yeah.
I have to do my search and maybe share it with you.
Do you think something like that would be helpful? Kind of like, sometimes people can't visualize an idea or visualize changes. So almost like a leading by example, showcasing things that are happening in different areas.
Yeah, definitely. Like this is very important. And I think like today, especially with the availability of technologies, you can measure lots of things, right? Like, but I have to search and go back to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, final question, Lina, and I think this is really important for students, is inspiration. I know growing up, different scientists, explorers, educators had big influences, on my life and the path I took. Is there anybody in the field of science or maybe an inspiring educator that really inspired you growing up?
Yeah, so when I told you, I was really fascinated by the life of scientists and inventors. So I think reading more and more on and trying to understand how they found their interest and how they came there is very important. It's really inspiring for all of us.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, I want to start out with a huge shout out to our classrooms today. There were so many groups tuning in, saying hi. There were tons of questions coming in via the live chat, which is just awesome. So thank you so much for sharing all those great questions with us. Lina, a huge shout out to you and the research and the work that you are doing. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you so much for sharing, your expertise. It's been a fascinating conversation. Really important insights. We really need to be thinking now about what we're going to do with our cities to combat climate change and make sure we're ready for the challenges of the future. So again, a huge thank you for joining us today. It was great to spend some time with you.
Thanks a lot, Joe. It was really a pleasure for me also to be here. Thank you.
All right. Well, I hope everybody has a great rest of the week, and we hope to see you in future events. Thanks so much for being with us today and talking sustainability.